In this video, I'm looking at houses that are located in clusters within the Greenbelt. For many of these dwellings, the council submitted that there was a special case for the protection of the character of the Greenbelt. The uniform response of the inspectors was that properties within the Greenbelt had the same permitted development rights as those outside the Greenbelt. This is a detached two-storey dwelling which sits in a generous plot among a cluster of similar properties. It was previously in agricultural use, and the approval to convert it to residential use came with conditions, one of which was the removal of a wide range of permitted development rights. The council's argument relied on their supplementary planning document, Development in the Greenbelt. This included the option to remove permitted development rights which might threaten the openness of the Greenbelt. However, the framework states that planning conditions should not be used to restrict permitted development rights without clear justification. Furthermore, conditions need to be reasonable, necessary, and to be precisely defined by reference to the relevant provisions in the GPDO. The inspector considered the exercise of permitted development rights was unlikely to result in a disproportionate addition to the original building. Any potential impact on the Greenbelt was insufficient to justify the condition. As the condition was neither reasonable or necessary, the appeal was allowed. This property is a semi-detached house with fields to the side and rear. Approval was secured for a two-storey side extension to replace a single-storey conservatory. The approval included a condition that removed permitted development rights under clauses A to E. The council did not detail what developments it might object to, although it did advise that the appellant was seeking to build a large rear extension. The inspector had the following to say: the extension might exceed the 40% guide for additions, but it wasn't considered excessive for this site. It was unlikely that the appellant would seek to cover up to 50% of the curtilage with buildings in the light of the current layout. And thirdly, the site was well contained through the boundary treatments. The inspector concluded that the condition was neither reasonable or necessary in the interests of the Greenbelt, and the appeal was allowed. On this site, there's approval for a new dwelling house, subject to a condition removing all permitted development rights. Although the site is on the edge of open countryside, it is not isolated and is on the periphery of a concentration of commercial activity. The site appears to be visually self-contained due to the existence of high brick walls, mature trees, and thick hedging. The inspector did not consider that any permitted development works would materially harm the openness, character, and appearance of the Greenbelt. As the condition applied was neither reasonable or necessary, the appeal was allowed. This property is one of a number of detached properties in a ribbon development. There are 2 levels to the front elevation and 3 levels to the rear elevation. Approval for the new dwelling was accompanied by a planning condition for the removal of classes A and E. Class A does not permit extensions forward of the front elevation. As the dwelling occupies the full width of the plot, there's only the potential for a rear extension. As there is no public view of the rear of the property, the inspector was happy that there was no visible harm to the character of the area. Class E does not permit outbuildings forward of the front elevation. Sheds and greenhouses are visible in the rear gardens of neighbouring properties, and the inspector considered such a restriction for similar structures for the appellant would not be reasonable or necessary. Boundary treatments, including fencing, substantial hedging, and a number of trees, were considered sufficient screening for any outbuildings to be erected. And so, as the condition was neither reasonable or necessary, the appeal was allowed. This property features a barn space bookended by 2 dwellings. Approval was gained for conversion of the barn into residential space to be divided between the two dwellings. The approval was accompanied by a condition for the removal of permitted development rights under classes A to E. According to the inspector, the council had little convincing evidence to present, only that the site lay within the green belt. Without reasonable justification for the condition, the appeal was allowed. This is a development approved to erect 3 detached dwellings with garages. The condition applied by the council was for the removal of permitted development rights under classes A, B, C, E and F. The council had not detailed how works completed under these rights would adversely affect the neighbours' amenity, and the inspector considered the 3 dwellings to be located in reasonably generous plots with adequate spacing from neighbouring properties. Neighbours would not be impacted unduly, and the inspector did not consider that exercising such rights would cause harm to the openness of the green belt to the extent that justified the condition. He also found that the condition was a blanket removal of freedoms, as the wording restricted all 5 classes in all 3 plots, contrary to PPG guidance. As the condition was neither reasonable or necessary, the appeal was allowed. That's it for this video. Please like or subscribe to support this channel. And next week I am looking at standalone properties located in the Greenbelt. Thanks for watching. See you next week.